Hello, welcome everyone. We are live coming to you from Washington, D.C. in my case, and I'm joined by Alix Cook, who is in Los Angeles area at the moment. And we're going to be talking here about using Prefect in the wild with a variety of folks that Alix works with in consultant space. Before we get started here, just remind everybody that we have a chat and you can ask us questions. So if you got a question for Alix or myself, please throw it in the chat. I will lead the way here with a welcome everyone message. And there you go. So feel free to throw any questions in there as they come up. If you're watching this in the future, welcome. Thank you for watching in the future. So any other exciting things going on with Prefect? If you're not already following us here on Twitch and on YouTube, please do so that we can make sure you don't miss any of the action and that's anything that's happening. Did want to let you know that we had some exciting training classes. Alix and I were just talking about this. We just had one in Boston a couple weeks ago, our PAC Prefect Associate Certification class, live in Boston for 2 days, and that was a lot of fun with 25 folks. We had one in Chicago in October, and we're planning some. I'll put something about it in the chat here in a bit. Planning one in January in San Francisco, and February in New York, and then March in Washington, D.C., and then London. I'm going to go over to Europe in June is our plan. So lots of training coming towards you if you're interested in any of that. So Alix, you have been using Prefect for how long
now? Probably a little bit over a year.
Okay. What did you start with it when it was V1? Was that what you were using at the time?
Yeah. So I've actually been a part of implementing sort of a Prefect setup for 2 clients that I work for. As mentioned, I'm work kind of in a consulting capacity. And the first client we started off, probably kicked that project off about October of last year. We were using Prefect V1, and we were also using a total self-hosted setup. So hosting, the server, the UI, just all in AWS.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay, nice. And then you've kind of migrated V1 to V2 with a couple of folks. What's that been like?
Yeah, so the second client, we kind of kicked off the Prefect project earlier this year. Let's call that March or April, using V1. But for that client, it was more appropriate to use the managed solution. They didn't have an ops team or an infrastructure team. Their ops and infrastructure were consultants, so it didn't really make sense to do the on-prem solution. So did manage, started off with V1, got pretty far into that migration, or starting to use that and migrate some scheduled jobs to using Prefect. Then I just made the executive decision to start using Prefect 2 for a variety of reasons. Probably the main one being that we had a very restrictive infrastructure, which I can get into, but basically the concept of work queues and concurrency management in V2 made a lot of the hacks and things I had to build on top of Prefect obsolete. So basically able to clean up a lot of tech debt there, move forward to 2.
Gotcha. So do you find yourself doing the implementation on this, and is it kind of like a software engineering role, a data engineering hat, machine learning ops? Like what all hats are you wearing?
Sure, good question. My background is mostly infrastructure, DevOps, kind of like reliability engineering. I also do a bit of product work, have done some kind of a bit of data engineering in the past. That's definitely not my forte. So in this capacity, I was doing, I would call it kind of like a platform engineering / infrastructure engineering approach. Like I was setting up the infrastructure and the bits and pieces around setting up the flows, and that was a lot of code and agents to be able to work in our restrictive environments, and also to make it like super easy. So the engineers at this company that I'm working for, all they have to do is decorate a function with a special decorator, and it would automatically become a flow and
Awesome.
deployment.
Yeah. So you made it. Did you make a your own decorator that like so you double decorate things, or how did you do it?
Yeah, so the decorator is really a wrapper over Prefect's decorator. There were
Gotcha.
just a lot of things that we also wanted to do. So like I wanted to make sure that we were pushing Datadog events for each like on flow start and flow finish. Stuff like I also have this concept of sort of like I call it like real-time deployments where we wrap the flow in another decorator, and once on flow complete, it'll kick itself off again. So like stuff like that, which is just kind of like stuff we want to make sure always happens, so that the engineers don't have to work that into their like code and remember
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Easy for them, right? That's the goal.
Yeah.
Cool. So are you using AWS for a lot of this, or are you using a variety of things?
So that's a good question. We use this, our infrastructure is launched on this infrastructure as a service product. It's called Aptable, and sort of think about it as like Heroku. So very limited in what we can do. We have no elasticity as it goes to compute resources. Basically, we're limited. Everything is run in a Docker container, but it's not privileged, so we can't run Docker in Docker. Yeah, it's fairly restrictive, and has caused a lot of problems, not just with running Prefect, but with our web server, with a bit of everything. So had to build a lot of little tricks into what we're doing in order to support it.
Gotcha.
And make everything run smoothly.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like keeps you busy. That's
Yeah.
job security, right? Interesting. And have you used Prefect with another client too, or am I?
Yeah. So the first client, it was AWS, and we were running the flows in EC2,
Okay.
Fargate.
Mm-hmm.
So that was in Prefect 1, so I get the verbiage confused between the two, but yeah, we were basically launching Fargate containers to run each flow. That was a very different scenario because we weren't running a lot of jobs with that client, but the jobs that we were running ran for a very long time and were compute intensive. So a little bit different than what I'm doing with Prefect now, where it's like a lot of jobs all the time, but not very compute intensive.
Yeah, really different use cases there. That's interesting. So do you think the first client will migrate to V2 soon? Are you still involved there, or is it see how that goes?
So we were able to step away from that project, which was actually a good thing. We were able to set it up for them, and they don't feel right now that it's necessary to move. And I don't blame, because it's really just right now they have this one single thing that runs, and they have it. All they wanted was a way to be able to have somebody log in that was not technical and be able to kick off this ETL process that does a bunch of stuff.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. Set it and forget it if it's really, it's working.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. At some point needs some work, but let it go as long as it can. Yeah, that makes sense. So, Alix, you shared something in the community Slack channel, some snippets that were, what was going on there? Are you, do you want me to, should I try to throw this in the screen here? Is that helpful? Want to talk it? Is that
Sure, we can share it, but I can also explain. This actually ties into sort of this like restrictive environment that I kind of referred to. So I think the bits that I shared a snippet that is a bit of code that is running an agent in a specific way, and wrapping some of those processes, and then some flows that are being run on the side that sort of like it's auto managing cleanup and such of flow runs. So we have this problem where in Aptable, we have no control over the life cycle of containers that aren't serving traffic. So we don't have a way to manage the we basically, you get a sig term, and then, a couple seconds later you get a sig kill, and there's really nothing you can do about it. You can't configure the time between that. You can't do custom like liveness and readiness. It's really hard to rely on any cleanup at all in this environment. So basically what I ended up doing was utilizing a couple of little tricks with Prefect. So basically what you're seeing here is that when an agent picks up a flow run, and that agent is still running. And it's important to know that the agents are running everything in the local process. So when I say like sig kill, it's killing the agent and all of the processes that are running the tasks. So what this agent does is it basically pings a date time block and that date time block is keyed on the flow run ID. And it's basically a way to say like, hey, I'm an agent, I'm still up, I'm still running this flow run. I'm here. And on the flip side of that, like if this agent gets killed, it will stop pinging that date time block, which brings me to the flows that are in the next bit of snippet that basically go check these date time blocks and sees if there's any stale flow runs. So saying like in some specific amount of time, if a flow run hasn't pinged, we're going to say that flow run, that process that flow run is running in has been canceled, and we're going to go cancel the flow run or restart it depending on some set of parameters. But basically this ensures, because we heavily rely on having only one version of a deployment running or one flow run of a deployment running at a time. So the problem that we get into if we were to get sig killed is that run that never crashed or got canceled or finished, like it's going to make sure that no other flow runs can run from that deployment. So we needed a way to clean it up. So that's kind of what this does. And it just kind of like uses the Prefect API and block storage, and it's a pretty simple implementation to do something a little hacky, but it works.
Yeah, it's clever. I haven't seen anyone else use blocks in that way. I think you all create a good number of date time blocks. That's for sure.
Yes.
Interesting. Yeah, that's very cool. All right, I will take that off the screen. My screen share. Boom. All right, cool. Yeah, that's awesome. So appreciate you sharing that with the community over there. So just curious here, did you look at other kind of different solutions as you were working with things here, and what made you go with Prefect?
So I came into, when we were first looking at solutions for the first client that I was mentioning, I had like known about things like Airflow and such, and I had in my mind that just was not the right solution. That was a little heavy-handed and almost missing some features for what that client specifically was trying to do. And a couple other things, like another thing that we looked at was temporal. That also, yeah, temporal is nice because you can support a couple different languages and whatever, but that client, all their engineers do Python. It was like Python all the way. There was never a world in which they were never not going to be using Python. So, just didn't really make sense. And I think for this client where we're using the managed product, I think that if you're talking about temporal at the time, like Prefect had much more mature, and from what I could tell, like a larger community, and like that, having worked at a company that had an open source project before, like I think that it's really helpful to have that not just like people hammering at the product, but sort of like people that can come and ask questions, if you're like having an outage, and like the more people there are, the faster you're gonna get a response. And also the more things that you're gonna have Googleable or Slack searchable or what have you. Yeah, and I think that from an operational perspective, especially for the client that we chose to do the managed solution for, it seemed to me that Prefect sort of had the most hands-off operational experience, which was something we were looking for, because one day I might, walk away. Like this client might terminate the contract and I'll have to walk away. And if they're left with something that they can't manage, like it's not a successful product for me. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great to hear. It really fits with our goals of kind of incremental adoption, making it so you don't have to change your code much to use Prefect, and then hopefully make it easy for folks to continue to use it into the future. Very cool. How was it learning V2? What was that process like? Was the concepts, was there tricky stuff, or was it like, yeah, it wasn't too bad?
Wasn't too bad for me. Initially, like obviously that difference between flow registering and what a deployment was, I think that tricked me up like maybe a little bit, but I was also given a very nice walkthrough from somebody over video. So like that really helped.
Yeah.
And definitely the documentation has gotten like orders of magnitude better since I sort of first started adopting Prefect 2. Like I was going in and I was just basically reading a lot of the code initially, which I was very familiar with the V1 code as well because I had been in there. So I think that that made the transition easier for me. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't too difficult for me. Like I understand things like queues and stuff like that. So
Good knowledge, existing base share. But that's awesome. I'll make sure Terry, our documentation guru and head, hears that, because yeah, I know he's spent a lot of time on it, and a lot of folks try to contribute to make the documentation as helpful as possible. And there's always more we can do there, but it's something we definitely care about a lot. Very cool. Awesome. So in your Prefect kind of journey here, is there anything you like wish that Prefect had that it doesn't do yet, or is there anything on the roadmap that you're really excited about?
So roadmap wise, I think there's like this blog post, I think right about when Prefect 2 was launched more or less, about sort of the observability API and kind of the future of what that looks like. And there are a lot of things there that I'm very excited about. So like with this client right now, we're working on sort of refactoring a lot of their workflows from sort of this like pull-based, like scheduled sort of ETL, sort of data syncing architecture to something that is a little bit more event-based. So having stuff like triggers, I think is going to be super helpful moving forward with that. And one thing that I sort of wish, and we kind of had, I think in Prefect 1, this sort of existed if you could figure out how to do it in the right way, but integrations with sort of like things like Datadog or like InfluxDB or being able to kind of plug in to any of these like metrics products to like kind of get auto exported metrics would be super nice. Like we ended up building that, but that's just because like it is, if the code that I wrote broke down, I'm not given that most of the engineers at this company that I work for, they are like product engineers and not infrastructure engineers, might be very hard for them to fix. So it'd be nice if that kind of came out of the box. But
yeah, absolutely. No, integrations are definitely a priority here. We've been adding a lot lately, and we usually often call them collections in V2. So if anyone sees that, you're like, what's a collection? It's just some kind of integration, often has some kind of block with it, or at least flows or tasks. And Datadog is one that I feel like might be on the roadmap here in particular, but I know we're kind of maybe adding an average of 2 a week or so, 1 a week, 2 a week. Metric flow we just had come in, so maybe I haven't used metric flow, but it sounds like maybe it's in that space a little bit. Definitely, we have an open metadata one here. It's new, so yeah, more stuff coming in that area.
I think that's due to the way that we like sort of what we're doing is like, I think we run hundreds, I don't know if it's on the order of hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of flow runs a day. And they all have various impacts on the business. And like, just, if you have like 1 or 2 flow runs, it's super easy to go check the dashboard and be like, oh, that thing didn't run. But when you get to hundreds of thousands, it's not sustainable, and you have to be able to get alerted when these things aren't running or they aren't running correctly or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's for sure. Making that smoother is definitely something we want to do. Yeah, we have, and just for folks who maybe, if you're watching this, if you haven't been checked out the UI lately, there've been a number of things there to try to help with scale, trying to be able to do things in batches a little bit more easily and just move around a little more easily. It's pretty cool what's been introduced here in the last couple of weeks. So we'll just kind of keep working on that and try to keep making it as awesome as possible. Cool. All right. Any other thoughts you want to share with listeners, Alix, or questions for me about anything?
Thoughts that I want. Open forum.
Open forum, dangerous. Anything here? Taylor ticket lines, crypto. We were just, all the topics of the day we were sharing before that. We could talk for a long time. What's going on with Twitter? I mean,
yes. Yes.
So much fun stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like what I'm maybe what I might leave with is I think that you know, so I've like been in the code and stuff quite a bit, and like I think that Prefect has worked really well for us because we really needed something that was flexible due to this like crazy environment setup, and with like kind of these like open source SDKs over the API, like that has made things like so much easier for the thing we were using before was basically just it's called Dramatic, if you've ever heard of it. It's basically kind of like Celery for Python. And we were running scheduled jobs with that. And it was impossible to track anything down. You had to have an intricate knowledge of like Redis, Postgres, and like the Dramatic code itself to be able to even understand if a job was running. Like that's not even going to say like whether or not they succeeded or what the history is or whatever. And so like from that point of view, the fact that we were able to enable people that weren't engineers, more sort of like engineer adjacent, sort of in an analyst position, to go like enable themselves to be able to go check up on sort of what the state of the data was. And that basically freed up a bunch of engineering time because I didn't have to go into the database and do some like mapping from Redis to Postgres magic to figure out just if things were sane. And so I think that is why this has sort of been a success story for us. It's opened up engineering time so that we can focus on like feature work instead of tracking down bugs or non-bugs or whatever they were.
I love that, Alix. That's great. It's something we always tell folks. You know, you can get other folks to collaborate more easily with Prefect. You don't have to necessarily be into the code all the time. You can use the UI. You can check on things. You can do various ways you can collaborate. And hearing about it actually saving lots of time is awesome to hear, because that's the promise, and it's great to see it happening. Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Alix. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and we will look forward to seeing you around on Slack. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, hit a message on Slack. Is that the best way to go? Or
yeah, Slack's the best way to go. I'm bad at checking email. I'm almost always on Slack though.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a place to be. All right. Well, thank you, and have a good day. See y'all. Bye.